Good evening, everyone. My name is Archie Green. I am the Support and Education Coordinator for Nami Greater Cleveland. Welcome to Cultivating Insight, Mental Health, and Zen Buddhism. We are so excited and happy that you have joined us tonight. I've been producing each of our faith-based events, and this has been the highest registered event. So we're very excited to have you all here. I know we have also some people from other states outside of Greater Cleveland, and so we are grateful to have you all here. So at this time, I'd like to tell you guys just a little bit about Nami Greater Cleveland and what you're in for tonight. Here. Nami, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, founded in 1979, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for millions of Americans affected by mental illness. It started with two moms who wanted better for their sons. Our mission is to empower people living with mental illness and their families to achieve a better quality of life by providing support, info, referrals, and advocacy. We know that education plays a critical role in reducing stigma. In addition to presentations like today, we also provide courses taught by NAMI certified teachers and highly trained volunteers who either have lived experience or are family members. These courses give information on diagnosis, treatment services, communication skills, and coping strategies. We offer support groups for family members, peers, and both. We also operate a helpline with the live chat that is open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please visit our website, namigreatercleveland.org, for the most up-to-date calendar of events. Nami Greater Cleveland is able to offer all of our programming free of charge due to the generosity of our funders. Please be sure to complete the post-presentation evaluation from our Survey Monkey so we can continue to serve the community and do our part in helping everyone live their healthiest lives. And so helping me out tonight, who you'll periodically see in the chat, is our intern, Megan Kovac, who will be sharing the link for the Survey Monkey, which you all can fill out after Susan's presentation. And she will also be taking questions from the chat after the panel discussion, which will happen towards the end of tonight's program. At this time, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. After a 40-year career as a middle high school and college teacher, Susan Raquel became a licensed professional clinical counselor, providing service to adults, families, couples, children, teens with anxiety, depression, ADD, and ADHD, as well as gifted individuals and families. In addition, for the past 50 years, she has been the group leader of the Cleveland Zazen Group, a Zen meditation group located in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, following the traditions of the Rochester, New York Zen Center, founded by Roshi Philip Kaplow. In 2004, Susan was ordained as a lay member of the Three Jewels Order, a service arm of the Rochester Zen Center. She is currently at work on a book on the 10 Zen precepts and establishing a private counseling practice, Sangha Care Counseling, LLC, to blend Buddhist philosophy and Zen practice with appropriate counseling strategies to help individuals build balanced, joyful lives. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, Susan Raquel.
Good evening and welcome everybody. What a pleasure and a privilege it is to be here. I've had a long journey to get to this point, and in one of the very first, I'd like to just talk in general about the fact that body, mind, and spirit are not separate. That anybody who has been alive for any length of time is pretty much aware of that. But it became very clear to me in the very first opportunity I had to go to a workshop sponsored by the Becks, who are the founders of cognitive behavioral therapy. And they talked about empowering individuals just in the same way that Archie did to have a better quality of life. And they identified 5 components of overall well-being. And they were sleep, a healthy body, exercise, social relationships and interactions, and meditation or prayer. When I heard this, I realized how my Zen practice could be such an asset, both to myself as a therapist and to the clients that I would see. And so it's in that spirit that I hope to bring this presentation so that we can all get together and contribute in difficult times and in easy times to having more balanced, more joyful, more grounded daily lives. So I'm going to do screen share and start the PowerPoint. Is this the right time for that, Archie?
Yes, it is.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right path here.
You're doing great.
Okay. My PhD is not in technology, which will become evident very quickly. So let me go back for a second. Okay, here are the 5 for anyone who might be taking notes if you're an academic. The big 5, and I refer to these with my clients as, are you getting good sleep? Are you taking care of your body? Are you eating healthy? Do you exercise a minimum of 20 minutes a day, preferably outdoors? Do you maintain social relationships with family and friends? And do you have some meditation or prayer practice, something that connects you with a universe that is bigger than yourself? And those 5 things are such an integral part of Zen practice. Okay, why isn't this happening? I don't know. Hang on. I'm figuring it out. Okay, so we're focusing on Zen Buddhism in this, and it's an interesting question. Some people say, well, is Zen a religion or is Zen a philosophy? And frankly, it doesn't matter. Because for most of us who are practicing Zen, it's a practice. But this is a little bit about the history of it, because you can't be born a Zen Buddhist. You could be born a Buddhist, particularly in other countries, but Zen is an active practice. It is the sect of Buddhism, among many, and it's a sect that emphasizes the meditation practice, not some of the other aspects of religion. And it's founded in the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. He was a very wealthy prince 2,500 years ago in India. So one of the things one of my teachers says is that not everything that's true really happened. So I'm going to tell you about Siddhartha, But you can choose to believe it or not. That's up to you. He was a very wealthy prince, and he got frustrated with the amount of privilege and wealth that he had. He was surrounded by marvelous food and amazing people, and he had everything you could possibly have. When I talk to kids about it, I always tell them that he had the latest PlayStation, and he had the latest iPhone, and he had all of the things one would possibly desire in his life. But for some amazing reason, this young man was not satisfied. He just said, isn't there something else beyond this? Many of us have asked this question. And the story goes that he and his charioteer went out into the city, and he had lived behind the walls of this compound. And during those trips outside of his compound, he came in touch with a very old man, and he looked at this person and said to his charioteer, "What is this?" The charioteer says, "This is old age. This comes to all of us." And man, he ran right back in to the protected place. But he was still curious. He still wondered, is there something more than this? So he went out again, and this time he saw a very ill person, covered with boils. India was very poor at that time, as there's a great deal of poverty in India today. And he said, "What is with this person?" And the charioteer said, "This is illness. This too comes to all people." Right back he went. The third time he came upon a funeral. So can you imagine the amount of determination that it takes to go back and back and back and put yourself in that situation? And so he went back, and this time he came upon a funeral, and cremation was the approach of the time. And he said, "What is this?" The charioteer said, "This is death. This too comes to all of us." He went back, and the fourth time, can you imagine? The fourth time he went out, and this time he saw an ascetic monk, asked who this was, and he was told that this is a monk who has given up everything in search of his true nature. Siddhartha did not invent meditation, but he left this privileged, wonderful life and headed off and spent many years in an ascetic lifestyle. When he was at the point of death, he realized that if he continued with these ascetic practices, he would die. And he didn't want to die before he had answers to the questions that most of us ask. And those questions basically are, why am I born? Why do I die? And what am I supposed to do while I'm here? So he took some food, sat down under the bo tree or the Bodhi tree, and as the only thing that we take on faith in Zen practice, he came through his meditation practice to a deep and complete awakening. And what did he awaken to? He awakened to the Four Noble Truths. The first one is that life is suffering. And here's where those of us who have been alive more than about 15 minutes know this. One of my teachers says suffering is a pretty powerful word. And he said that the word dukkha, which is the Sanskrit, I think, maybe the Pali word for suffering, really means unsatisfactoriness. That sense that something is missing. And he describes it as when you go to the supermarket and you get a grocery cart and you start pushing it, and you get one of the ones where the wheel goes kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. It still moves forward, but not quite the way it's supposed to. And that's kind of what dukkha is. It's like your life is moving forward, but there's a sense that the pieces are not fitting together. So that's the first noble truth. The second one is that this suffering comes from delusive thinking, craving, attachment, the poisons of greed and anger, and a sense of ego-centered self. So if this were the only two components of this religion, that life is suffering and we bring it on ourselves, it would be the world's most depressing religion. But it's the third and fourth noble truth that bring us hope and provide the way forward. And that is that there is a way out. This awakening, Siddhartha was a person. He was a man with his 2 feet on the ground. I was going to say he put his pants on one leg after the other, but I have no idea if he wore pants. But he was just a human being, just like we are. And he came to this awakening and came to a realization of his own true nature, which is that we are whole, complete, and perfect if we can only see it. And the way to get there is through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path includes right view, how we approach things, how we look at things, right resolve, are we committed to things that we do? How do we use speech? What actions do we take? Are we earning our living in a way that is helpful to all beings? And the overriding component of those first 6 are we living in a way that is compassionate and doesn't just recognize our own true nature, but the true inherent wholeness of all living beings? And right mindfulness is staying aware in each moment. And you can't throw a stick these days without finding a mindfulness group or a mindfulness practice or a mindfulness video or a mindfulness app. And it's the last one, though, that Zen focuses on, and that is right concentration. Right now, many people think that they can multitask, and we can't. Brain research is pretty clear that we can only do one thing at a time. And when we think we're multitasking, we're just doing a lot of things badly. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I caught myself driving one time. I was on my cell phone to my daughter. NPR was on the radio and I was driving. And I really had to say, and I was drinking coffee, what are you doing? This is the opposite of Zen. And so I got off the phone with my daughter. I turned off the radio. I put down the coffee and said, for crying out loud, Susan, just drive. So this is what it means to try and figure out what is Zen in daily life in the 21st century, because it's a lot different than it was for Siddhartha. So, moving along. Meditation, this is a quote from Jack Kornfield, quite a famous Zen teacher. Meditation helps us look deeply at the sorrow that exists now in our world, and to look at it, at our individual and collective relationship to it, to bear witness to it, to acknowledge it instead of running away. So many of I'm leaving Jack Kornfield for a second. So many of our addictions and passions are ways to escape facing what is in the world in the present moment. Without mindfulness and compassion, the suffering is often too great to bear, and we close our minds, we close our eyes, and we close our hearts. And that is the opposite of Zen. So, how is then Buddhist practice connected to mental health? To some extent, I think at this point, this is kind of obvious. Siddhartha said, I teach but 2 things, suffering and the end of suffering. When I went to hear the Becks and learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, I came to understand how specifically meditation practice could work to help people with depression, with anxiety, with ADHD, and all of the other, DSM-5 categories of mental states that perplex us. And I'll show you a diagram about this. Acceptance and commitment therapy also is rooted in what is right now. But for a long time, people would just say, "Listen, all you have to do is be in the moment," as if you could wave a magic wand and say, "Oh, right." Like you forgot your keys. So, oh, right, I forgot how to be in the moment. As if it was a magical thing. But it takes practice because we are so trained to be easily distracted by this thing and that. YouTube is addictive. Facebook is addictive. And they're made to be that way. Video games are made to be addictive. And all of the other kinds of pleasures that in small doses, there's nothing wrong with them. But when we use it to medicate our feelings, literally, by numbing ourselves with these things, we're not present. So Zen Buddhist practice, meditation practice, walking practice, and so on, helps us manage our thoughts, which helps us manage our mood. Now I'm going to try something I want to show you how this works toward breaking these habit patterns of thoughts and addictions. But before I do, I want to make sure for anybody who is saying, but wait a second, my grandfather was an alcoholic, or all of the men in my family have had ADHD. Zen does not discount that we have a physiology that we got, that we have genetic predispositions, and that this is the body, and I like to say this is the body we got this time around. But frankly, I don't know whether there was a before or an after, but I like to believe that this is the body I have right now. You can't tell. I'm 5'2". So if I had really wanted a career in the WNBA, I'd really be in trouble because there just aren't very many 5'2", and at this point it's like old women in the WNBA. But because that's the body I got. Didn't work for ballet, wouldn't work for gymnastics either, because this is the body I got this time around. But I'm so grateful to have a human body at all. So I want to show you something else, and it needs to try something. I want to share the screen in a different way. I'm going to share my whiteboard. Now you need to understand that I cannot draw at all, so you just have to go with the flow here. I want you to imagine that an event happens. No matter what the event is, something happens in your life. The next thing that happens is this is the cognitive behavioral framework. We have, I know it looks terrible, just be patient. We have a thought about that event, and that thought puts a frame around the event. As a result of that frame, we feel certain things, and that frame is what affects our mood. And then our mood determines our behavior. How are we going to respond? And that behavior will lead to subsequent events. Let me give you an example. You're driving. Someone cuts you off. Happens every day. If your thought is, that so-and-so, how dare he? Doesn't he know that I'm on my way to work? And so your mood becomes angry, and maybe you step on the gas and you zoom around him and you cut him off, and then who knows? And who knows what happens as a result? What if the same thing happens? Somebody cuts you off, you're driving, and instead you think, oh, I hope nothing's wrong. I hope that person isn't off to the hospital to see someone who's taken ill. Your mood is going to be one of compassion. You're going to feel patience. You're going to hope they get there okay. And your behavior is going to be grounded in that compassion. And this is the CBT model. So what does this have to do with Zen? Zen is the practice of attention, of being able to move our thoughts from where they go to where we want them to be. And that is a power that we have. So I'm coming back to the PowerPoint. That's how, hang on. That's how we use Zen meditation practice to manage our moods and manage our thought. In Buddhism, we have something called the three treasures. We have Buddha, and Buddha, there is a misunderstanding sometimes that the Buddha is a god, and that when we have a Buddha figure in our meditation space, that we are bowing to a god, and that's not it in Zen. Roshi Kapleau always said that when we bow to the Buddha, we are horizontalizing the mast of ego. And that's what has always felt appropriate and comfortable for me. The Buddha is a representation of our inherent awakened true nature. You can see a seated Buddha behind Jeanette if you can see her in your gallery view. And you notice the posture, because posture is very important in Zen. When we are slumping over like this, and we are not using our energy in the best possible way. We are not able to draw on it. So in Zen meditation practice, especially seated, but also in walking, we are grounding our body in order to be able to make it more likely that when we still the body, we can still the mind as well. So the Buddha is our inherent awakened true nature, whole, complete, and perfect if we can only see it. To be a Buddha means to be awake to what is and to live in the reality of the moment. The past is over, the future is uncertain, and there is only this moment of wholeness and completeness because all beings are Buddha. The Dharma is the teaching, the path, the guidelines. When I first began practicing in 1969, I think Roshi Kapleau's book was the only one and one of the first that actually talked about the practice of Zen meditation. So we had the teaching, we have the path, we have the guidelines, we have our teachers. And then we have Sangha. And interestingly, Sangha is the community of seekers. All of those who are on the path to trying to find out who they are and to manifest that true nature. And it's a wide path. And I say this because in our Cleveland Zazen group, when we come together for meditation, nobody in the group was born a Zen Buddhist. And many of the participants in our meditation group have feet in other traditions, practicing Catholicism, practicing Judaism, they're practicing with the Unitarian Society. And so there are many other ways of seeking. And what I have found in my counseling practice is that when I invite people to participate in and learn as part of their therapy to do a Zen meditation, if they're open to it, what they find is that there is a deeper sense of the divine in the religious tradition in which they were originally born. The Sangha, yeah.
Just checking. Were you planning on sharing the PowerPoint slides again during this part of your presentation?
Yeah. Are you not seeing it?
No, you're gonna have to reshare your PowerPoint. Sorry about that.
What happened? Oh, as I said, this is, frankly, the technology is not my strong suit. Thank you very much. Let's come back. I knew something wasn't quite right because I couldn't see any of you, but I just figured, all right, so here's this.
There we go. All right. You're doing great, though. You're doing great.
Thank you, Archie. All right, so here we are. I had only gone to one other slide. So this is what I was talking about the community of seekers and others on the path. So let's think a little bit about, oh, I know what I wanted to say about Sangha. Sangha used to be just those people who were monks. And it is a much broader understanding now of what Sangha is. And that, the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu got together and wrote a magnificent book called Joy. And you would think, these two gentlemen are coming at this from such different perspectives. And yet the unity that they found, the joy that they found as seekers together, it's a magnificent book if you haven't ever read it. What are the actual practices of Zen? What is it that we ask those who practice Zen to do? The first and the one that's most obvious for people is sitting meditation. Most people start out with 10 minutes or so of a sitting meditation, and there are a range of practices that one can begin with. But all of them are focused on sitting still for a period of time, using the practice that you've been given, and every time your mind wanders, which it will, 1,000,000 times in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, however, it will stray because it is the nature of the mind to think. Our job isn't to get the mind to stop thinking. Roshi Kolheid says the only time you stop thinking is when you're dead. So we're not going for that. We are going for a sense of being able to move that attention. Now go back to that circle, because if your mind is going to, that's so-and-so who cut me off, you're going to feel one way. You notice you think that and you say, oh, wait, maybe there's a real problem for that person. And suddenly your body feels different. You sink into your true nature and into a sense of compassion. So every time you practice moving your attention to the breath, to the counting, to the questioning, whatever the practice is that you have, and you don't move. Now, the being still is very, very important in Zen meditation, because I guarantee you that if you are doing your sitting meditation and your right cheek itches and you reach up to scratch it, within seconds, your left cheek will itch, and then your head will itch, and the next thing you know, you're fidgeting. There's a Yiddish expression, spilkus. It means ants in your pants. And I have seen beginners who are, it's like, wait, shh, really quiet the body, still the mind. So that practice, and I want to reiterate something that I say to clients and beginners in our Zen group. Nobody is good at this. I've been practicing for 50 years, and my grandson is graduating from high school, and I can't tell you the number of times when I'm sitting that I think, how can I be old enough to have a grandson graduating from, where did things, and then I go, oh wait, bring it right back. Bring it right back. But that's what practice is. In walking meditation, we walk in a still fashion. Some groups walk very slowly. Some groups walk very quickly. We walk in sort of you're still continuing your practice in walking meditation. There is chanting in Zen meditation, and there is also Dharma study. But practicing Zen is an action. It's something you do. It's not a set of beliefs. And Siddhartha said, don't believe anything I say. find out for yourself. So one of my clients with whom I have quite a good relationship over a period of time has been doing meditation as part of her counseling for a long time. And we've been using some body-mind strategies. And she recently said to me, you know what? This is better than Ativan. And I thought, oh, good. It's also has a lot fewer side effects. And if there are side effects, they're all good ones. So this is an experiment. This is going inside and examining who and what you are on the mat or in your chair. This is something else I wanted to say about sitting meditation. You can see behind Jeanette, she has a bunch of cushions, but you can also notice that there's a chair back there in her Zendo, and that's that to practice Zen meditation, you do not have to sit in full lotus on the floor. We have all kinds of cushions and chairs for all kinds of bodies and all ages of body. I've never, even when I was 19, I couldn't sit in the full lotus. And now, even when I go on an extended retreat, I find that I need to take breaks and sit in a chair because the body that I had at 19 is not the body that I have now. So it needs a little bit more comfort, but it still needs to be able to have feet on the flat on the floor, back straight, and be in a zazen posture. It just can't be on the floor for 7 days. What I have learned in my counseling practice is that for many of my clients, mindfulness has not been enough. It's relaxing. It can often help them fall asleep. It has some fine benefits. There's mindful eating, which is always a nice addition for some people. But it's my view that counseling, therapy, and meditation and meditation practice can all help each other. They support each other. And meditation has helped many of my clients. The other piece that's different is that Zen meditation emphasizes coming to awakening, coming to a kind of awareness that that is not emphasized in most mindfulness practices. And please understand that I am not putting them down because I have never done serious mindfulness practice. I have only done Zen meditation practice. And certainly if you read Jon Kabat-Zinn's work, his mindfulness practices, which actually were rooted in Zen long ago, in his own life, it's very effective for any number of things. It asks deeper questions in many cases. One of the interesting aspects of meditation that has helped many of my clients and has been an adjunct to their therapy is the concept of no self. In Buddhist practice and in Zen, there is no separate self. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have a healthy self-concept. That is essential to functioning in the world. But that ego-centered striving that says, I'm better, I'm more important, and so on, is really important. Just because you meditate doesn't mean that people aren't going to be obnoxious to you or you're not going to be obnoxious to them, that you aren't going to have illness or face trauma or feel sad or have losses. It doesn't eliminate life. It just brings you into the present moment, and it is a life skill. Zen meditation is a life skill. It helps us function in the life that we have, but it requires daily practice. When my daughter was learning to drive, the very first time I took her out in a car, she took a turn a little bit too fast. And I said, you need to go slower when you go around that curve. And she, as a typical 16-year-old, said, don't tell me what to do. I've been watching you drive for years. Because she thought that watching someone drive is the same thing as practicing driving. So watching a meditation video or watching someone else sit is not going to do it for you. You really have to do the practice day after day and find that, oh, I didn't respond in such and such a way. I responded more calmly this time, not every time. So it's important that you know, and that as I talk about these things, that I am not like this all the time. I am sometimes crabby and obnoxious and angry, and but I'm working on it. And I am very grateful to have this practice that helps me to do that. What we call this is a quote from Bodhipaksa. What we call the self is not a thing. It is a process. It's an activity. It's the sum total of what we do. It is not static. The self does not exist as a separate entity that interacts with the world, but is the sum total of the interactions of a living being and its environment. Living with the notion that the self is separate and static leads to suffering because such a notion flies in the face of reality. Physicists tell us that when we are in conversation with somebody sitting across from us, our cells are being exchanged. I mean, if nothing else, COVID has taught us that the air that is going between us and among us is being exchanged. So we know this. And so one of the things about the relationship to medication, there's nothing about practicing that Zen that says that you can't take medication to help you. But medication by itself, without therapy or without some other practice, doesn't change behavior. You need to have something else. So ADHD, if someone has ADHD and is struggling in school, if they don't change what they're doing, Strattera and Concerta and Ritalin don't do your homework for you. You still have to have some new study skills. Now, your concentration may be improved, and I'm not talking now about children. Your concentration may be improved, but if you don't do anything with that concentration that moves it in the direction of schoolwork or whatever, then the medication itself is not going to solve the problem for you. I think that because we have some limitations to our time, I may not go over this. But this is what the root of CBT and ACT and so on really are. I wanted to mention something about stigma. So I'm going to come back to this other slide briefly. Many people come to counseling with a mistaken view that something is broken or wrong, that they are that there's a stigma to coming to therapy, that there's a stigma to saying, I think I'm depressed more than most of the other people that I see. But in a Zen Buddhist context, confronting that suffering that someone is experiencing, admitting it and saying, well, let's see what we together can figure out as a way to ease your suffering, to ground you in the joys that you do have, to help you have more of those, and so on. I think that is really, really important, and is an important interaction of counseling and Zen practice. So I'm going to get rid of the sharing part. And there's a bunch of things in the chat. The full author's name, the presenter. Should I, Archie and Megan, should I take a look at these questions now?
What we can do, if you could refer the name of the author, that's fine. We are going to be taking full questions at the end of the panel discussion, which will take place after our keynote and after a short break.
Okay.
But if you want to give the name of the author, Susan, feel free to do that. And it's 7:44, but it's fine because we're not having a Q&A after your presentation. So you've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. The two books that I mentioned, one was called Joy, and that's the one that is by Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. The other book that I mentioned the last quote that's on the slide is from the Dhammapada, which is the teachings of the Buddha. And the translation that I particularly like is by Easwaran, Easwaran. As for Jack Kornfeld, he has a gazillion books. Just Google him and you'll find many of those. I don't remember what the other books I referenced were. But if someone is interested in starting Zen practice and wants to start by reading something, there are two books I typically recommend. One is, and I will type it into the chat, one is called The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau. And that was my root teacher. And he is the person who started me on this path. And the other book is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi. It's a somewhat gentler, less directive. I don't know, other people can comment about it. I loved it. It was wonderful. But I am not a scholar of Buddhism or of Zen. I have more Zen books than you could possibly imagine, and I have probably read about 15 pages in each one, except for the Three Pillars of Zen and Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and the Easwaran book. And that's because Roshi Kolheed, who is my teacher now, always says, anything you read about Zen should make you get up and want to sit. If it doesn't do that, put it aside. So that's why I end up with reading only about 15 pages. And I find that the intersection, just sort of as a conclusion, I find that the intersection of Zen meditation practice and therapy, both for myself as a practitioner and for my clients when they are open to beginning meditation, has had a profound effect. And for those people listening who are clinical therapists in any way, social workers and mental health practitioners in any way, I find that when a client brings me a really, really difficult challenge they're facing, they're crying, they're really upset, I breathe into my belly, which is full of 50 years of practice, and I am able to be more present with them than I think I might have been able to be otherwise. And I also find that on days that I do sitting meditation in the morning, before I go to a day's work seeing clients, I am a better therapist. I am more able to listen and more open to what clients present. And so I see these two things as clearly connected. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have shared my experiences in both fields with all of you. So Archie, whatever comes next, bring it on.
Thank you so much for such an insightful presentation during Cultivating Insight, Susan. I know that some of you have questions. What we're asking is that you hold off on the questions until we finalize and finish our panel discussion, which will be starting after a short, brief intermission. Megan has put a link to the survey in the chat as well. So if you get an opportunity during our short break, please fill out the survey based on the presentation that Susan gave. I really hope you guys enjoy that presentation. And we've got a very exciting conversation that we'll be starting in about 5 minutes. So what we're going to do now is take a brief intermission. And at 7:55, we will come back and I will introduce our panelists. Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Mission, 5-minute intermission. And there's a panel discussion. Now you understand that this ain't for
And welcome back to Cultivating Insight, Mental Health and Zen Buddhism. We just wrapped up a beautiful presentation, a very insightful presentation from our keynote speaker, Susan Raquel of the Cleveland Zazen Center. And now what we are going to do is we're going to have Susan, as well as two other esteemed guests, join us in a special panel conversation with regards to the subject matter of what we discussed tonight. So first, I'd like to bring back to the stage our keynote speaker, Susan Raquel.
All right.
Your tech skills weren't that bad, Susan. Trust me. They weren't that bad.
All right.
At this time, I will introduce our second panelist. Jeanette Prince Cherry was born in North Carolina in 1967. She served in the United States Air Force for 8 years and earned a BS in industrial engineering from Southern Illinois University. For nearly 15 years, Jeanette worked in engineering before leaving this vocation to raise a family and to dedicate herself to Buddha Dharma. Jeanette began practicing Zen in 1994. Since then, she has been maintaining a daily personal practice and regularly attending group sittings, session, or intensive meditation retreats and other residential training in both US and Japan. She works closely with her teacher, Roshi Bodhin Kojade, co-spiritual director of Rochester Zen Center. With his ongoing guidance and support, Jeanette began instructing others in Zen meditation in 1999. In 2011, Jeanette became a lay novice in the Three Jewels Order of the Cloudwater Sangha. After a comprehensive 3-year period of Zen training, study, and service, she completed this novitiate and earned full investiture. In 2018, Jeanette was ordained a novice Zen Buddhist priest of the Three Jewels Order. She plans to complete her novitiate for full ordination in 2022. Jeanette feels honored to serve Zen Sanghas or communities in Louisville, Kentucky, and Rochester, New York. This time, we'd like to bring to the stage Jeanette Prince Cherry. And now everybody can see the Buddha behind you. I know Susan had mentioned it. So take notes on the pose, on the posture. I know I was taking notes during your presentation, Susan. And
Thank you,
lastly,
Archie. And you did a great job.
thank you. Lastly, John Wilhelm. John is a semi-retired psychiatrist with 40 years of practice. He ran a private general adult mental health practice in Middleburg Heights for 29 years. Currently, he continues to work part-time for a community mental health center. He has practiced Buddhism for 22 years and Zen Buddhism for 20 of those years. He was lay ordained in December of 2014 and was ordained a Soto Zen priest in August of 2021. He is in the lineage of Kobun Chino Otagwa. Now bringing to the stage, John Wilhelm.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome, esteemed guests. I was taking some notes during that presentation. I am a firm practicer and believer in meditation. So to hear about the meditative practices in Zen Buddhism was a little eye-opening for me. I actually, during your presentation, Susan, I kind of counted back the years for how long I've been meditating. And it's been 10 years this year, actually, that I've been doing it. And like you said, it is a lifestyle. It is something that you develop over time. Can each of you kind of speak on what brought you to Buddhism, as well as the practice of Zen Buddhism in nature, as far as, was there a moment of enlightenment? Was there someone that you met that brought you to this practice? And whoever wants to start can start. Oh, Susan, you're muted.
Jeanette or John?
All right, I'll go ahead and start. So, so Susan in her presentation was talking about the Four Noble Truths, and that first noble truth being the noble truth of suffering. And that's what brought me to Zen practice. And I think that's what brings most people to Zen practice is suffering to one degree or another. And mine was getting out of the Air Force after 8 years, my entire adult life being in the Air Force, and having to transition to being a civilian. And I had no idea how to do that, and was stressed out from that, from making that transition. And as a way to find my way, I started doing meditation, and that was in 1994, and I have not turned back since. So that's my story. How about you, John?
We don't have enough time for me to tell you that. I'll hit a few of the high points. I mean, it was a long and wandering. I've been kind of a seeker, if you will, starting from college forward, and first interested in the Buddha from reading Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and then reading the Rock Garden by Nikos Kazantzakis. And then I raised my family in the middle of that, and I was kind of doing some things, but not a lot. I also had been in the Peace Corps and I was in Peace Corps in Iran and traveled in Afghanistan, saw the Buddhists that had been blown up by the Taliban. I saw them before they were blown up. I can't describe, the reason I bring that up is only because there was an amazing peacefulness about that place that I felt no place else. I mean, and I've traveled extensively because of the Peace Corps and was in India and lots of other places. But that was a very special place, and that stuck in my mind. And then as I continued to look at things and go about things, I think the thing that caught me was, I've heard the quote that Susan had at the bottom of one of her things, stated a little differently, but the quote was, "Believe nothing you hear, regardless of who said it, even if I've said it, unless it agrees with your common sense." This is a guy I like. This is something that I can get a hold of. And the rest, I started working with people at Zen Mountain Monastery in upstate New York. I am not part of the Kaplo people. I'm actually, there's a slight difference between Susan and Jeanette and I, and that I'm a Soto Buddhist, a Soto Zen Buddhist, and they're Rinzai, but that they're still very close together. It's a slight difference, but working in or being connected with Zen Mountain Monastery was probably the thing that really got me centered. They were very, very clear about how to practice. They kind of recommended books. I went there once a year. That supported me for 15 years. I went there once a year for a week-long retreat and read and meditated every day. The one thing I'll tell everybody about meditation, if you're anything like I am, I'm terrible in the morning. And when I was first meditating, I thought I was just struggling to get it in my day. And I went to Zen Mountain and I was talking to one of the monks, and he said, "You know, my family thinks I'm the most disciplined person in the world, but they don't get it. If I don't meditate, when I get up at first thing in the morning, it doesn't happen." And that hit, and I've been meditating first thing in the morning ever since. And that was 20 some years ago. So that's kind of how I got there. Starting in 2014, I got connected with Crooked River Zen Center, which is the Soto group here. And we share the space with Susan, who fortunately has allowed us to share space with her at their Wilton Road address. And that's really where I took lay ordination in 2014 or 2015, I mean. And then as things developed, I just got more and more involved with the group, and then was ordained a priest at last August.
It's awesome. One of the things you mentioned was Soto versus I believe it was Rinzai priest. Can you guys break down the difference? And maybe for those who don't know, like some people may believe that Zen Buddhism is itself religion, and that's not separate from just Buddhism. So I know that there are various forms of Buddhism. Would it be possible for you to break down some of the different types of Buddhism for our audience?
So, I can't speak for John, but Jeanette and I had talked about this question, and neither of us are really scholars. But I think if you think about Buddhism as a great big umbrella, and there are many divisions, just as there are in Christianity, just as there are in Judaism, the umbrella is the basic Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path, all of that. How you manifest that in your services and in your practice is where the differences are. And what's interesting about Buddhism in general, and particularly about Zen, is that Buddhism originated in India and moved from India to China, from China to Southeast Asia and Korea, from Southeast Asia and Korea to Japan, and from Zen in particular, from Korea and Japan to the United States. And as it has moved from country to country and from continent to continent, it has taken on some of the cultural components of where it has found itself. And American Zen is relatively new, as is in general American Buddhism. And so we're still finding our way in what that looks like. So Tibetan Buddhism, as it's practiced even in this country, which is what the Dalai Lama has brought here, and his those traditions, and we have a Tibetan group here in Cleveland. Ani Palmo, many of you who are Clevelanders may know of her. She's on retreat this year, this whole year, which is why I had invited her to be part of the panel, but she's in silent retreat. Anyhow, their practice looks a lot like the way they practice in Tibet. A lot of how we practice looks a little bit like how they practice in Japan. We bow, we do prostrations, and translating some of the chants into English. And then you go into Zen, and then there's Soto Zen and Pure Land Zen, and it doesn't matter. In the end, the overall beliefs are the same, and there are many books written on all the different kinds of Buddhism. I just don't know what they are.
Got it.
Jeanette, John, anything to add?
Well, just if you go back historically, what's always happened is there have always been different schools of Buddhism and different schools of Zen even, which is where Rinzai and Soto came from. But if you go back to the golden age of Zen in China was in about 800 AD. And there were multiple, the Emperor of China recognized recognized Buddhism and was actually having made it essentially a state religion and spread it all over the place. And then a guy by the name of Bodhidharma came to China, who was the one who spread Zen, but Buddhism was already there. And there's plenty of stories. I won't get into stories about Bodhidharma and Zen, but each of these is just a different way of doing the same thing. if you will. I mean, that's how I would say it. Certainly, I can pick up any of the Buddhist literature, and it makes sense to me. There's not something where I'm sitting there saying, "Oh no, not that, but this." It's pretty. Most of it is pretty universal, but it's how we practice that's different.
Mhm, mhm. Got it. The next question I actually wanted to direct at Jeanette. Some people may not believe that the leadership in Zen Buddhism is diverse. With you being an African American woman, I wanted to pose the question: have you received any type of pushback? Has there been anything that you've had to utilize as a way to cope with that? Or am I totally off base with my question? Is there a wide array of diversity in leadership in Zen Buddhism?
No, I think your observations are pretty much spot on as far as the diversity in Zen Buddhism, at least. Maybe that's true for, no, I don't think it's true for all of Buddhism. I know it's not true for all of Buddhism, but I think it's definitely true for Zen Buddhism. Um, uh, and and what's true about Zen Buddhism is, I think it's true just in general that people practicing Zen are a part of this society. I mean, then we bring into our practice, we bring into the communities uh, all that we have absorbed from society, um, both the helpful stuff and the unhelpful stuff, the attitudes, and again, people come to this practice and stay in this practice because of what Susan was talking about in the Four Noble Truths. The first one being suffering or unsatisfactoriness. Can't get no satisfaction. So, and then she talked about the second noble truth, about the cause of this unsatisfactoriness, this cause being delusion. And this delusion, I think it's probably defined in Buddhism the same way it's defined in psychology. It's believing something that's false is true. Believing something that's not real is real. And that base delusion, in which all of our delusions spring from, is this delusion of self, of the existence of self. And so if there's a self, there has to be an other.
Mm,
And um, this root delusion is expressed in so many different ways of me and this bag of skin, or or my team, my political party, my sports team, or my group, the people that look like me or the people that think like me. And that sense of self and other is gives rise to all the other kind of otherisms like ageism, racism, sexism, ableism. And people that are practicing Zen have to contend with that stuff ourselves. We have to contend with that stuff too. Susan talked about the third noble truth being the way out of this unsatisfactoriness, out of this thinking of this delusion, and she described the fourth noble truth of the Noble Eightfold Path. But in Zen, the way out boils down to this, and it is that the more that we can liberate ourselves from this delusion of self and other, the more our innate wisdom, compassion, and virtue is going to function freely, the more it's going to manifest itself. And so as
mm,
this Black woman practicing and serving in the Dharma, um, liberation from delusion is what I focus on. That's what I choose to focus on. It's liberation from this sense of self and other. because the more each of us can free ourselves from this nightmare of separation, the more we can feel this intimacy with others. And the less we're going to be inclined to harm others. There won't be racism, there won't be sexism, there won't be ableism or ageism. And so that's what I focus on. That's
Mm.
what I feel like I can do something about. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Jeanette. I wanted to direct the next question to our practitioner and semi-retired practitioner on the panel. So obviously this program, this initiative, faith-based, focuses on the intersections of faith-based practices and mental health resources. Can you guys speak a little bit about, what are some of the, the common areas of stigma from some of the clients, as well as in the Zen Buddhist community? Is it primarily like, people don't feel comfortable disclosing that information? I mean, obviously, across the board, there is a stigma with mental health. And so would you guys describe, just in the practice of, of doing mental health, your clientele, can you speak from the point of what are some of the common areas of ailment? What are the common areas of stigma as well?
Well, I think at first I want to say that I have to come at this sort of in a different direction than Jeanette does. But I'm sorry, no, I meant Susan. I apologize, Jeanette. I come from this because as a physician, the primary thing that I'm looking at to start with is that physical body that Susan was talking about in her talk. Those are the realities that I have to begin to deal with. Is there a biologic disorder here? Is there a physical disorder there? I'm looking at all of that. And what I realized as I was thinking about this for the panel tonight was just how much mindfulness, just how much that sequence that Susan was talking about in terms of thinking and thinking changing your behavior, it changes how I look at patients. And most of those things weren't things that I wasn't doing already. It just expanded them. It made me stand back a little farther. There are times I know where my ability to listen really has improved because of Zen and being able to listen to what's uncomfortable, which you have to do as a psychiatrist anyhow. But it's learning to listen to what's uncomfortable inside of you, which is what Zen teaches you to do, and meditation teaches you to do, also helps you to listen to things that are harder to listen to in others. And oftentimes those things have helped me to better approach a patient, to better connect with a patient, to understand their discomfort, their pain. I do have some patients who meditate. It's interesting that just yesterday, I had a patient tell me that meditation saved her life. She has a very difficult disorder and she's got some very challenging medical problems. But she meditates and she's found that's helped her to remain centered, to not go off on tangents, to really kind of value her life, I think, in some ways that she wasn't before. So that's kind of how it fits in for me. Now, I didn't address the stigma piece of this. I guess that's something I've worked with long before I was a Buddhist. And so when I came to Buddhism, I don't know that it really affected much of it, because oftentimes the first thing, especially because I've been doing this for 40 years ago, and I mean this is not an exaggeration, 40 years ago, 80% of my patients were women and 20% were men, because men would never come to see a psychiatrist. That's changed. And it's probably more like 55-45 now, but it's much, much more even than it used to be. But much of what I do from the first time somebody comes into me is not talk about stigma as stigma, but talk to them about how they feel about what this disorder is and how they're going to deal with it and what we can do about it.
So I want to add to that a little bit, in the sense that when you come at both counseling, for me, when I come to meet someone in a counseling setting, or when I come to do an introduction to them for Zen, my approach is essentially the same, that people come because they are suffering. And so once we accept that all of us are suffering, it can help to eliminate the stigma. This is just what is, you know, and to be able to be with them in that suffering and to be able to say, yup, that relationship is really hard for you. I can really hear that. Or, boy, that's whatever that happens to be. And when I do the introduction to Zen meditation practice, I often talk about it as a life skill. In addition to, here you can come to awakening, but here's how in your daily life, people tend to think that meditation is going to take them into nirvana, and it's like everything is, they're going to be just blissed out all the time. And it is not that. It is, oh wait, here's this. I can handle this. I have this strength. I can manage, and then I have this therapist, this psychiatrist, this practice, these medication, whatever it is that I can bring to bear to live a balanced and joyful life. So I think that some of that can eliminate the sense that a stigma comes from believing that you're the only one. Oh my gosh, I must be the only one that feels this depressed. Well, yeah, and you and all the 25 other people that are lined up in the hallway. And so there's really kind of no stigma. There is still stigma out in the community, but I see how both Zen practice and in my counseling practice, I try to eliminate that.
That's great. And I definitely can, somewhat relate in terms of with my meditative practice, especially when I am depressed and I'm going through a tough time. I usually don't really get my answers until after, after I've done my practice and I have conversations with either my therapist, Reiki healer, my wife, whoever. That's usually when those revelations come. At this time, I'd like to open up to our audience question and answer. We do have a few questions, and I'm going to let our special intern, Megan, read off some questions for our panel.
Hi, thank you for that introduction, Archie. So the first question is for John, and somebody asked, what were the authors and titles of the 2 books that you named?
The two. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. The first book is called Siddhartha, Sidharta, I believe. And it is by Hermann Hesse, Hesse. And the second book is called The Rock Garden, and it is by Nikos Kazantzakis, which is Kazant, Zakis, I believe. I will warn anybody reading, this is a man who wrote a long time ago. He is a bit misogynistic, but he does have some good things to say. I believe he was the Secretary of State of Greece back in the early 1900s, as I recall, but he was also an author. He wrote a number of things. You probably know him from The Last Temptation of Christ. He also wrote that.
Wow.
And a number of other things. But those are the two that I recommended. Those are the two that I had read. The other pitch I would make in here, Susan mentioned Joy, the book Joy. It just happens I was at the Cleveland Film Festival and saw the movie called Mission Joy, which is a movie about the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And it is absolutely wonderful, more just to see these two wonderful men interact with each other, joke with each other, tease each other, and talk about serious things too. But it's, if you can find it on YouTube, possibly, I don't know. But it's called simply Mission Joy. And it is about the two of them. And I did want to mention that too, because it would be a nice piece, and it may well lead into the book that Susan mentioned, which I have not read, unfortunately.
Thank you for that. And then someone asked, can any of you comment on how rumination plays a role in mental health disorders and how Zen practice might help clients decrease rumination?
If it's okay, I'll take that one. I have a number of clients who get stuck in thoughts and in what would be called rumination. And one of the advantages of one of the meditation practices is a very specific counting practice. And every time you catch yourself ruminating, to move your attention to that counting practice. And if you practice it on the mat or in the chair, it will be there. But the key is with rumination as part of a mental health disorder is that you don't notice that you're doing it. And so the first thing, one of the things that happens when you're doing sitting meditation is you really come to notice how often your thoughts get stuck in that. Now there are, and John can talk to the fact that there are medications that can decrease rumination, but a companion, and I don't know anything about them, but I do know that for some of my clients who get stuck in a particular thought loop and dwelling on this same thing, often something from the past that they can't let go of. And I'm not talking about trauma. I'm just talking about something that they can't change anyway, but they get stuck in it. And the meditation practice really helps with that for many people.
There was another follow-up. Does that also help with OCD, the counting practice?
I haven't worked with anybody with severe enough OCD with whom I have given meditation as part of their therapy. So I can't say. Maybe John has.
Let me just say, OCD as a disorder, probably, it depends on the severity of it, to the point where one of my mentors, when I was a resident, said that every successful person has a modicum of OCD. And what they mean by that is just, you've got to be organized and do all of those things that our obsessive compulsive traits lead us to. The problem is sometimes people can get obsessive thoughts that are very negative. And I do know of that in one case of a person who was unable to meditate because that is what was happening. Now, he's also in treatment, and once he got that part under control, then he was able, I mean, he's still practicing, but he periodically, if the obsessions, if the obsessions get bad because his are so negative, he has to stop meditating for a while. And he will stop, and it's kind of comes and goes. But severe obsessions, a lot of times, do need some medication to slow them down. I mean, that it truly is a biochemical disorder to have obsessive compulsive disorder. It gets confusing because there's also obsessive compulsive traits, which is the thing that I was alluding to at the beginning. You know, it is when it becomes dysfunctional, and when those thoughts are such that you simply, they are out of control in your head, and they can be if your obsessive compulsive disorder is bad enough. But I don't think those people are likely to come to Zen because of, as a first approach, I'm sorry, because of that, because it just wouldn't, it would intensify it. If you sit quietly and you're having one obsessive thought after the next, if you have true obsessive compulsive disorder, it probably will just generate them one after the other. And you probably would need some initial treatment, but that doesn't mean you can't meditate, and it doesn't mean it's just kind of getting past that part of things. Hopefully that was clear enough. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that was great, John. We have time for one final question before we wrap up tonight.
All right, and then for the last question, where can people go to learn more, like different techniques like the counting practice and other practices?
Well, there are, for those of you who are in Cleveland, there are a number of Zen groups. John's Crooked River Zen Center is one. Our Cleveland Zazen group is another. There is a Pure Land group on the west side of Cleveland. And what I would say is it's really best to go to an introduction to Zen meditation. Jeanette does her introductions for the Louisville Zen Center online. The Rochester Zen Center does them online, particularly during COVID, pretty much but it is really, really valuable to go get some direct instruction from a person, and to try not to begin these things just from, you know, something you read or some YouTube video you saw, because what happens is, this is just my view, that if you start to do it for real, things will come up. And you need to have someone that you can go to be able to say, hey, I was sitting and this happened, this weird thing happened. And somebody will say, oh yeah, yep, that happens. And then you, oh, well, okay. But having someone you can go to help guide you is really valuable. And, you know, any of the three of us can direct you to places, our own or otherwise, if you happen to be somewhere else. I don't know where everybody of the 50 or so people who are on here, I don't know where you all are. Right, Jewel Hart in Ann Arbor is Tibetan, somebody put on, and there's a Tibetan group here, but that's not Zen, so I can't speak to that. But the practices are easy to do. They are simple to do, they are not easy to do. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, there's no set of beliefs you have to buy into. You don't have to convert, and you don't have to be anything in order to practice Zen meditation.
Love that. And with that, that concludes our program, Cultivating Insight, Mental Health and Zen Buddhism. I want to thank our keynote, Susan Raquel. I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Jeanette and John. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this rich conversation as much as I did. As a couple housekeeping reminders, there is a survey that we ask all of our viewers to fill out. It takes a max of about 5 to 6 minutes. That helps Nami GC to continue to put on programs, informative programs of this nature. And lastly, this program has been recorded and will be up on the Nami GC YouTube channel for your review. If there was anything that you missed, or if you'd like to rewatch and or share this video with your communities. Nami GC also has the helpline, which we can direct you to any mental health resources. That number is 216-875-7776. My name again is Archie Green, Support and Education Coordinator for Nami Greater Cleveland. Thank you all for being here. Namaste. Have a great evening and be well.